Okay, I hope I'm audible to all the students who are attending this lecture of Introductory Microeconomics. We continue with our lectures on consumers, producers, and efficiency of markets. Okay, we continue with our lectures on this topic. This is the second lecture based on this topic. Okay, consumers, producers, and efficiency of markets. Okay, this is formally chapter 7 of MANQ. Formally, this is chapter 7 of MANQ. And in the last lecture, we were looking at the concept of consumer surplus. If I quickly revise with you, consumer surplus is the difference between the amount the consumer is willing to pay for a good minus the amount he actually pays for that good. And graphically, we had observed that consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the market price. And another observation we had learned in the previous lecture was a fall in price increases the consumer surplus and a rise in price reduces the consumer surplus. So all this we had covered in the previous lecture of consumers, producers, and efficiency of markets. Now, guys, in this particular lecture, we look at the concept of producer surplus. We look at the concept of producer surplus. So producer surplus is the amount. Producer surplus is the amount that a seller is paid for a good minus the seller's cost of providing it. Minus the seller's cost of providing it. Okay, so when we talk about producer surplus, it is the amount which the seller actually receives for the good minus the cost of providing that good. Okay, so if I write it mathematically, so I can write producer surplus. Producer surplus is the amount a seller is paid. Amount a seller is paid minus the seller's cost. Seller's cost of providing that good. Okay, so this is our definition of producer surplus. It is the difference between the amount which a seller is actually paid minus the seller's cost of providing that good. Now, guys, let's understand these terms individually also. So when I talk about seller's cost of providing a good, what does that mean? So our next heading now is cost and willingness to sell. Cost and willingness to sell. So guys, when I talk about seller's cost, so I can write the seller's cost. The seller's cost is defined as the value of everything. The value of everything a seller must give up. The value of everything the seller must give up to produce a good. Okay, so when I talk about the seller's cost, it is not only the monetary cost. It also includes the time cost. It also includes the non-monetary cost, that is the pain or the sacrifice the seller takes in producing a commodity. So when we talk about seller's cost, it is the value of everything a seller must give up. Now, seller is not only shedding money, seller is also shedding time. When the seller is producing a commodity, it involves pain and sacrifice. So when we talk about seller's cost, it is the value of everything which the seller must give up or sacrifice to produce a good. So we can write, therefore, it is a measure of, seller's cost is a measure of seller's willingness to sell their goods and services. So that means when the seller decides the price, that price exactly equals the cost. So for example, suppose I have manufactured a pen for 10 rupees. Suppose I have manufactured a pen for 10 rupees. My cost is 10 rupees. I am willing to sell it for 10 rupees. What does this mean? This means the minimum price I want for this pen is 10 rupees. So when we talk about willingness to sell, seller's willingness to sell captures the cost of that commodity. That means the seller expects the price for the commodity to be at least equal to that cost of the commodity. So I hope students have understood the concept of willingness to sell. Seller's willingness to sell is at the price exactly equal to the cost of producing that commodity. So if I take an example, suppose we talk about a pen. Suppose a pen is sold in the market. Suppose a pen is sold in the market for $15. And the cost of producing that pen, cost of producing this pen is $10. All students, please understand this example. Suppose a pen is sold in the market for $15 and the cost of producing this pen is $10. What is this cost? This is nothing but my willingness to sell. It means when I sell this pen in the market, I will not sell it for any price below $10. I need at least $10. But actually the pen is sold in the market for $15. So what is my producer surplus? My producer surplus for this example is the price I will actually receive for the pen, $15, minus the price at which I was willing to sell, which was my cost, $10. That means my producer surplus for this example is $5. So I hope students have understood this example. So you all can write a small note. When we talk about willingness to sell, when we talk about willingness to sell, what does it exactly mean? So it is the minimum amount. It is the minimum amount at which a seller is ready to sell off his or her goods and services. So when we talk about willingness to sell, it is the minimum amount at which a seller is ready to sell off his or her goods and services. Now guys, let us look at the concept of producer surplus diagrammatically. So let's draw a diagram. Okay. Let's understand producer surplus through a diagram. So we have the x-axis and we have the y-axis. Okay. On the x-axis, we have quantity. And on the y-axis, we have price. Now, guys, suppose there are four sellers. Suppose there are four sellers, A, B, C, and seller D. So, guys, there are four sellers in the market. Seller A, for seller A, the cost of production is $500. It means seller A will sell the commodity for at least $500. He will not accept a price below $500. Seller B says, I will sell my commodity for at least $600, not less than that. Seller C says, I will sell my commodity for at least $800, not less than that. And seller D says that I will sell my commodity for at least $900. Now, guys, what are these prices? These are the willingness to sell. These are the willingness to sell. So now, guys, I can mark these on the y-axis. So 500, suppose my 500 is somewhere here. Then we have 600. Then we have 800. And then we have 900. And how many sellers are there? There are four sellers in the market only. Now, guys, suppose the actual price is below $500. Will seller A sell the commodity? No. Will seller B sell the commodity? No. Will seller C and D sell? No. That means when the price is below $500, no seller will sell the commodity. Because for seller A, the minimum price he needs is 500 and seller B, C and D need a price more than 500. But when the price in the market is exactly $500, when the price in the market is exactly $500, seller A will become indifferent. Either he will not sell or he will sell. So we have one seller who is willing to sell the commodity. That means when the actual price in the market is $500, when the actual price is $500, at this price, seller A will either not sell the commodity or he will sell the commodity. Okay. Now, guys, when the price is $500, B, C, and D will not sell because for them the minimum price they are willing to get for the commodity is 600, 800, 900. All of these are more than 500. Now, when the price in the market is more than 500 but less than 600, suppose the price in the market is $550. Suppose the price in the market is $550. At this price, will A sell the commodity? Yes. Why? Because for A, the minimum price he needs is 500. But in the market, the price is 550. So A will sell the commodity. But will B sell the commodity? No. Because for B, the minimum price is $600 and the actual price in the market is only $550. That means when the price is between 500 and 600, only one unit of this commodity will be sold because only one seller is there, seller A, who will be willing to supply at this price. Now, when the price in the market is exactly $600, when the price in the market is exactly $600, will A sell the commodity? Yes. Will B sell the commodity? B now becomes indifferent. When the market price becomes exactly $600, B will now become indifferent. Either he will not sell the commodity, in which case we remain at this point, or he will sell the commodity, in which case we will go to this point. That means when the market price is $600, our supply will look like this. At $600, A will sell the commodity for sure, but B is indifferent, because for B, the minimum price she needs is 600 and the market price is also 600. So she will either sell the commodity, in which case the quantity supplied is 2 units because there are 2 sellers, or it's going to be only 1. Now guys, when the price is between 600 and 800, now suppose the market price is $700. It lies between 600 and 800. Now guys, at this price, will A sell the commodity? Yes. Will B sell the commodity? Yes. Will C sell the commodity? No. Because for C, the minimum price he needs is $800. That means guys, between 600 and 800, how many sellers we have? Only 2 sellers. Now, when the market price comes out as exactly $800, will A sell the commodity? Yes. Will B sell the commodity? Yes. Will C sell the commodity? C will now become indifferent. Either C will not sell the commodity, in which case we remain at this point, or C will sell the commodity, in which case we now have 3 sellers in the market. I hope all students have understood this. And guys, the same thing goes for D as well. Now, when the price lies between 800 and 900, suppose it's $850. At this price, A will sell the commodity, B will sell the commodity, C will sell the commodity, but D will not sell because D expects a minimum price of $900. That means between 800 and 900, we will be at this particular portion of the supply curve. But when the market price is exactly $900, A will sell the commodity, B will sell the commodity, C will sell the commodity, D will now become indifferent. Either D will not sell the commodity, in which case we remain at this point, or D will sell the commodity, in which case we now have 4 sellers in the market. So guys, you can clearly see that our supply curve in this case is coming as a step-like function. It is coming like the step-like function. So I hope all students have understood the concept of producer surplus and willingness to sell. So guys, if I write it graphically now, graphically, what will be the producer surplus? So let's quickly write it. So graphically, producer surplus, is the area, below the market price. It is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. It is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. Now guys, the example I had taken, in that example, we particularly had only 4 sellers. And the quantity was discrete. It was only in whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But it can be continuous also. By continuous, I mean that between 1 and 2, you can divide it into infinite gradations. You can even sell 1.15 or 1.72, hypothetically. That means if I draw the diagram now, so it is now going to be a smooth supply curve. So we have quantity, we have price, and now our supply curve is going to be a smooth supply curve like this. In the previous diagram, I had drawn a step-like supply curve because in that example, the quantity which was sold was either 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. But in real life, quantity can be a continuous variable also. That means the producer can sell units even between 0 and 1, between 1 and 2. That means my supply curve will be a continuous curve now. So now you can clearly see, guys, suppose my price is P1 in the market. Now at this price, how much is the seller selling? Q1. What is the producer surplus? Producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the market price. That means this is my producer surplus. The shaded region is my producer surplus. Because every point on the supply curve will tell you what? Every point on the supply curve captures the willingness to sell. Understand this, guys. You all should understand that every point on the demand curve captures the willingness to pay. Every point on the supply curve captures the willingness to sell. And in today's lecture, we have learned willingness to sell is nothing but the cost of producing that commodity. So producer surplus is the difference between the actual price, which is P1, and the price at which the seller is willing to sell. So you can see from 0 to Q1, it is the area below the market price and above the supply. So suppose I label this as point A. Suppose this is point B and this is point C. So I can write when the market price is P1, when the market price is P1, producer surplus is the area ABC. It is the, I can write area of triangle ABC. Producer surplus is the area of triangle ABC. Okay, now guys, suppose the market price goes up. Suppose the market price increases from P1 to P2. Now guys, what will happen? When the market price has gone up, two things will happen. Producer surplus of the existing sellers has gone up. These are the existing sellers. So you can see the red shaded area denotes the increase in producer surplus of the existing sellers. Also, when price has gone up, some new sellers are also added. Understand this, when the price has gone up, some new sellers will also enter the market. So that increase in producer surplus of the new sellers is the brown shaded area. So how much quantity will be sold? Q2. So understand this, guys. I can label it. When a price has gone up, this is the red shaded region is what? This is increase in producer surplus of the existing sellers. Increase in producer surplus of the existing sellers. And the brown shaded area is producer surplus of the new sellers who are added to the market when the price has gone up. So when the price has gone up, some new sellers also enter the market. So that producer surplus is given by the brown shaded area. So guys, I can write the second case when the market price increases from P1 to P2, our producer surplus is what? Our producer surplus is equal to area of, so guys, suppose I label this as D and suppose I label this as F. Suppose this is E. So my producer surplus now will be area of triangle ADF. Okay, so and this I can trifurcate and I can write like this. So area triangle ADF means area of triangle ABC plus area of plus the area of rectangle BDEC plus the area of triangle CEF. So you can clearly see, guys, when the price was P1, producer surplus was only triangle ABC. But when the market price has gone up, producer surplus has also gone up. Now the producer surplus is the bigger triangle ADF. And ADF I can trifurcate into three parts: area of triangle ABC plus area of rectangle BDEC, which is the producer surplus of the existing sellers, which has gone up, plus the brown shaded region, which is area of triangle CEF, which is the producer surplus of the new sellers. That means what do we learn? If I sum up, so I can sum up and I can write producer surplus. If I sum up, so I can sum it up in 2 to 3 points. The first point we have learned is in this lecture is that producer surplus is the difference between two terms. Okay, actual price received by the seller minus the seller's willingness to sell. Minus the seller's willingness to sell, and seller's willingness to sell is nothing but the cost of producing the commodity. This is the first thing we had learned in this lecture regarding producer surplus. Second thing, graphically, producer surplus is the area below the market price. It is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. Producer surplus is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. And the third observation we have learned is an increase in market price increases the producer surplus, and increase in market price increases the producer surplus. And the second observation we have learned is a fall in market price reduces the producer surplus. Okay, so I hope now all students have understood the concept of producer surplus mathematically also, graphically also. Okay, so now guys, after having done the concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus, we now look at the concept of market efficiency. What is meant by market efficiency? So our next topic now is market efficiency. So market efficiency tells us the total economic well-being of the society. Market efficiency tells us the total economic well-being of the society. Okay, so I can say market efficiency is captured by the total surplus. So we can write market efficiency. Market efficiency is captured by total surplus. And guys, what is total surplus? Where I can write total surplus is the sum of consumer surplus. It is the sum of the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus. So guys, when we talk about market efficiency is measured by total surplus, which is the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus. Okay, now in the last lecture we had learned what is consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is nothing but the price which the buyer is willing to pay for the product. So I can write, in another words, I can write it as value to the buyers. Understand this, the price which the buyer is willing to pay for the product is nothing but the value to the buyer minus the amount paid, the actual price paid. Okay, and what is producer surplus? This is something which we have learned in today's lecture. So producer surplus is nothing but amount received by the seller. Amount received by the seller minus the seller's willingness to sell. Now, what is seller's willingness to sell? We have learned in today's lecture, it is nothing but the cost to the seller. So guys, understand this, buyer's willingness to pay is nothing but the value to the buyer. Seller's willingness to sell is nothing but the cost to the seller. Okay, now when we talk about a free market economy, in a free market economy, when there is no government intervention, when there are no taxes and subsidies, when there is a free market, in a free market economy, amount paid by the buyer exactly equals the amount received by the seller, right? When we talk about a free market economy, in a free market economy, amount paid by the buyer is exactly equal to the amount received by the seller because there is no government intervention. So now if I write total surplus, what is total surplus? It is the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus. So guys, we are adding this term plus this term. So total surplus is the value to the buyer minus amount paid plus amount received minus the cost to the seller. Now we have just seen that in a free market economy, amount paid exactly equals the amount received. So this term cancels out with this term. So I can write, what is my total surplus? My total surplus is nothing but value to the buyer. My total surplus is nothing but value to the buyer minus the cost to the seller. This is my total surplus. And when we talk about market efficiency, it is measured by total surplus. So for market efficiency to be maximum, total surplus should be maximum. And for total surplus to be maximum, the gap between the value to the buyer and the cost to the seller should be maximum. So I hope all students have understood the concept of total surplus. It is the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus. Okay, so I can quickly draw a diagram wherein I can explain to you the concept of total surplus. So let us explain total surplus diagrammatically. So you can see on your screens the diagram with the x-axis, y-axis. Okay, on the x-axis we have quantity, on the y-axis we have price in dollars. Okay, this is our demand curve, downward sloping. Okay, this is our supply curve, which is upward sloping. Okay, now every point on the demand curve captures the value to the buyer. We can write this. Every point on the demand curve, every point on the demand curve captures the value to the buyer. Okay, and every point on the supply curve, every point on the supply curve captures the cost to the seller. Every point on the supply curve captures the cost to the sellers. Now guys, what is the equilibrium? The intersection of demand and supply curves gives us the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. This is Q equilibrium. This is the equilibrium price. Now, what is the consumer surplus, guys? Consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the equilibrium price, which is the market price. This is nothing but my market price. So this particular portion is my consumer surplus, the red shaded region. This is my consumer surplus, and the brown shaded region is my producer surplus, which is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. Now guys, if I look at the quantity below the equilibrium quantity, suppose you can see, suppose I look at the quantity below the equilibrium quantity, Q1. So you can clearly see at Q1, value to the buyer. How much is the value to the buyer, guys? This point. This is the value to the buyer. How much is the cost to the seller? This is the cost to the seller. So you can clearly see at Q1, value to the buyer is greater than the cost to the seller. Okay, value to the buyer exceeds the cost to the seller. So this implies quantity goes up till we go back to the equilibrium quantity. Quantity increases till the economy reaches the equilibrium quantity, which we denote by QE. So if the economy is producing below the equilibrium quantity, at this particular quantity Q1, value to the buyer is more than cost to the seller. That means at this quantity, buyer is willing to pay much more than what the seller is willing to sell. As a result, seller will keep on increasing the quantity till we go back to the equilibrium quantity QE. And similarly, guys, if I talk about Q2, so in the diagram, you can see at Q2, value to the buyer, value to the buyer. This is the value to the buyer given by the demand curve. And this is the cost to the seller. So I can say this much is the value to the buyer or at Q2. And this whole expression, this whole gap is the cost to the seller. Talking about Q2. So value to the buyer is less than cost to the seller. So will the seller produce such a quantity? Why will the seller want to produce that much quantity when the buyer is valuing it less than the cost. So as a result, what will sellers start doing? Sellers will start reducing the quantity till we reach back the equilibrium. So I can say quantity falls till the economy reaches the equilibrium quantity. So guys, in a free market economy with no government intervention, your total surplus is maximized at the point E. You can clearly see at point E, total surplus is maximum. It's the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus. Before the equilibrium quantity, okay, before the equilibrium quantity value to the buyer, this is the value to the buyer. If I talk about Q1, this much is the value to the buyer and this much is the cost to the seller. So at Q1, value to the buyer exceeds the cost to the seller. That means the buyer is willing to pay more to the seller than what the seller wants. So seller will be motivated to produce more till we reach back the equilibrium quantity. And at Q2, value to the buyer is less than the cost to the seller. That means the buyer is willing to pay less than what the seller is expecting to receive. In that case, the seller will be demotivated to produce. So seller will reduce the production till we reach back the equilibrium quantity QE. Okay, so at point E, our total surplus is maximum. So I hope all students have understood and enjoyed the lecture. Okay, so guys, this is where I intend to stop in this lecture, and with this our lecture on consumers, producers and efficiency of markets is completely over. We have learned the concept of consumer surplus, we have learned the concept of producer surplus, we have talked about market efficiency, which is captured by total surplus, which is the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus. And what we have learned is, if I write the final line, what we have learned is that market equilibrium is an efficient allocation of resources. Market equilibrium is an efficient allocation of resources. Why? Because at the market equilibrium, total surplus is maximum. At the market equilibrium, which is point E in the diagram, you can clearly see that total surplus, which is the sum of the consumer and the producer surplus, is maximum. Okay, so this is where I stop in this lecture. I hope all students have enjoyed the lecture. Any doubt, you can unmute your mic and ask, or you can call up or mail me your doubts at divineschoolofeconomics@gmail.com. Okay, in the next lecture, we will talk about a new concept called taxation and the deadweight loss. Okay, formally that would be chapter 8 of Mankey. So this is where I stop in this lecture.